All right, here we go. Here we go. This rainy, rainy day, and it's not even a rainy Monday. My name is Natalie. Among many things, I'm the Good Shepherd Natalie, and I'm somebody who is here today to continue on answering question number 7 out of a total of 11 questions for the Shared Project Initiative, a group formed by William Peters with many different forums on people coming in who have had shared death experiences. I had a shared death experience with my father-in-law named JC on January the 28th of 2022, 4.5 years ago. Today is July the 23rd, 2026. I've been connected with the Shared Project, I don't know how, initiative program, whatever. I've joined in on 3 virtual Zoom forums where they have a guest speaker and we can chime in and say whatever, but otherwise we're muted. So this has been profound, literally profound. And I am one who has been, ever since meeting Jesus on January the 28th, 2022, my whole world, my whole being, my whole self, everything of me was catapulted into a whole new way of living and being, and yet not a whole new being, if that makes sense. I wasn't altered in such ways that I became somebody totally different, and yet there are a couple of others who have been with me during this journey who have definitely seen along the past 4.5 years something quite amazing and awesome and bewildering to even themselves. It's pouring rain and I have my coat on, but it's getting really hot. I feel like it's a sauna out here. These questions I answer are for myself. This is part of my journey. And I happen to be one who also, after meeting Jesus, began to lose that fear of living, that fear of universal trained notions of keep your secrets to yourself, don't air dirty laundry, and give basically false perceptions to the world. And I am not one who lives by perception. I have been very close to God and angels my whole life, heaven, from the time I was born and a little child, a little girl. I had no association with Jesus other than what I knew of Jesus, that we learn in our own ways, in our own lives. I never expected to meet Jesus. I never even dreamed of it. It just wasn't anything that was ever anything. And then there I was. And even today, I still find it hard to answer simply, well, what do you mean you met Jesus? Because it wasn't like I met Jesus, and had coffee with him. What happened was, while my father-in-law was dying in his bed in North Carolina here, this home that we ultimately moved into after he died, on February the 2nd, 2022, as I was driving interstate roads from Florida to North Carolina, about a 10-hour drive, for the first time in 20-some years of my life, completely alone, no children, no animals, no pets, no other passengers. There I was, with my steno notebooks next to me. I filled 3 steno notebooks up, front and back pages of this entire journey. All I can say is that from that moment, when I say catapulted, I mean catapulted. And it has been onward, upward, yes, then ultimately me becoming the Good Shepherd under heaven's having me know. I did not create hashtag the Good Shepherd Natalie on my own. I do understand that for a lot of people, these things that I share can sound a little bit like, well, crazy. And ultimately, that is what I have been blasphemized with and treated like by those who claim even today to care and concern for me, and yet have had nothing to do with me in 4.5 years. Question number 6 that I answered a few days ago was, how do you think you were able to have this experience? Today's question is, why do you think you were able to have this experience? How do you think? How? And today is why. Well, I'm going to start off by saying that after I met Jesus Christ on January the 28th, 2022, it was instantaneous for me to no longer ask heaven, why? It was an immediate, implanted, whatever you want to call it, downloaded, embedded, instant knowing that heaven doesn't want us to ask heaven why. Heaven wants us to seek, be curious, continue to have a yearning and desire to discover life. Heaven wants us to enjoy life, and heaven wants us to discover heaven on earth before we leave this earthly life and venture to heaven beyond this life. How? Well, I feel, like I said in question number 6, that I'm going to speak of me. I'm not here to speak of the whole world, but I do feel we're all born with a blueprint, very much so like a house, a dream house that we want to have built, and we go get the architect and they create this home and they show it to us. And yet with heaven, we don't need to make those changes to the blueprint. We don't get to make those changes to the blueprint. It is a blueprint, and this is how it's going to go. And yet heaven does ultimately, yes, gift us and allow us to live such ways where we do learn, we are able to have choices, we do have decisions to make and all of that. It was when I was 48 years old that I met Jesus. And then at the age of 51, 3 years later, we'd already moved in here. On my 51st birthday, I heard from heaven, and I don't mean heard in my ears, and I don't mean heard in any mentally ill or, schizophrenic ways. I heard through my soul heaven say, you are now the Good Shepherd, Natalie. And do you know, Natalie, that it takes 50 years, half a century, for any life on earth to become one of heaven's good shepherds in life? Well, that's kind of hard to share with people because, again, it goes back to the notion of being perceived as being crazy. And so that's, well, if you are crazy, then you're like, whatever. When you're not crazy and you're wanting to share this beauty of what you've experienced and continue experiencing every day since then, it's most frustrating to not be at least heard, felt, perhaps even questioned. Not why, but further questions. What do you mean, Natalie? But no, instead I got the police called on me, I got Baker acted. I have a hair on my lip. I'm the Good Shepherd here on a small hobby farm. I always have hair somewhere. Heaven is who also had me in becoming the Good Shepherd, Natalie, to begin living my life in fairy tale, farm tale, adventures, and journeys every day. It is the people that I've come in contact with in the past 4.5 years that I am ultimately aware of are divine-led individuals, such as my therapist, my BTF, best therapist friend, who I was forced into seeking psychiatric evaluation, threatened, and I went and got this psychiatric evaluation, and ultimately they were like, you don't need this, you need therapy. Well, that didn't go over well with those who claim to love me either. And yet I've now had over 100 sessions, virtual Zoom behind Barnway from here, therapy sessions with my therapist named Kathy. I'm always looking around because I did just let my birds out everywhere. I have 44 birds right now. And it is pouring rain. I haven't let the sheep out yet. It's been a big morning. We've had a snake issue here, and so I've had to bring my birds in at night and bring them out in the morning. And ultimately, what has happened since I met Jesus is I lost my entire family. Lost them? Yes. And yet it is those who will continue denying but we care about you. We're concerned about you. You know you can't be because you don't even know anything, and yet you should know something because I do post everything on my social media. And yet what I've discovered with all this realm of, in particular, family, is they can't even stand the sound of my voice or the sight of me. And so they may see my video and they're ultimately triggered to their own trained, learned, habitual negative connotations beyond perceptions of me. They don't even watch the videos. They, and then they go and continue talking, not kindly of me. Heaven has plans for all life. I've been told throughout my life, this all began way before I met Jesus. It's been my whole life that I've been close to heaven, and that I have been talking to angels my whole life and began delivering messages from angels to such persons in life in my early 20s, and I'm now 53 years old. These are all things that have been not embraced and have been denied. And ultimately, I have suffered the consequence of sharing. I'm not here to hate upon anybody. Well, that's a whole other thing too, because I can't explain any of this. And this is why I'm grateful to now be a part of, in my own ways, answering these questions with this shared project initiative, because to hear other people share their stories, well, ultimately it is true. When you have a shared death experience, that's much different than a near-death experience. Near-death experience is yourself. Your heart stops, you die for a second, and then you come back and whoa, A shared death experience is where somebody else who's dying needs somebody in life for some reason. And with my father-in-law, JC, who does share the same initials as Jesus Christ, who as well lived a life loving and worshiping and serving heaven, as a humble, beautiful soul and man in life, he needed somebody to carry on the Jesus sharing. And ultimately, it was Natalie, the daughter-in-law, who was chosen. Hey, these are choices that you don't really have a decision to make. Nor would I want to turn that down. It's been a most awesome, amazing, beautiful, very real life for me. And in me being pushed away from the circle of those I had been sharing my life with, losing my daughters, losing my husband, having no connections with my siblings, well, this is kind of what I've learned from Jesus, is Jesus that day was like, welcome, you are now here to serve heaven, and it's going to be a very hard life. Yet, Natalie, it's also going to be a very beautiful, fulfilling, purpose-led, lived life. And it has been. I am so blessed and grateful amidst all of the sham and drudgery and hate upon me, behind my back, denied that even exists, I'm not here to reciprocate such hate or anger upon anybody else. And yet it has been a difficult journey because I have had to be in such defense mode all this time. Heaven is real. Heaven on earth is real. And heaven wants us, again, to experience the beauty of life while we're here. Heaven knows that we are just living fast forward all the time, trying to make it through each day, whereas, then heaven gifts certain people in life where I've now, all these years, even losing my whole family, what I've ultimately gained is I have a purpose, and I now know it. You hear my flock right now, whenever I'm talking about heaven, they do chime in, and that's because I am feeling heaven as I am videoing this question number 7 today. And my flock feels my energy. I am the good shepherd. My flock knows all of how this person, me, feels inside. Without words. Without words. And yet this is another biggest part that heaven has had me since January the 28th, 2022, begin to redefine the very simple words of life, as well as the very simple words of emotion. Not redefine emotion, and yet redefine the words of emotion. For someone like me, I was told most of my life how I felt. You're angry, you're sad, you're too excited, you're talking too fast, and I never questioned any of this. This is not to say my family has been an awful or cruel family to me. I had a beautiful growing up life. I love my family, not loved, not past tense. And this is hard because for me to be sharing this now with the world, I understand that this is a fear now my whole realm of family has, and their fear is not because of me. Their fear is because they know the truth hurts, and it is true how I have been treated. I've lived ever since then, hands out, palms up. I give it all. I give it all. What does that mean? So many things have come through, especially while I'm delivering angel messages to persons in life, where very philosophical metaphors, cliches, phrases, words will come through, and it's like, I'll go, okay, wow, and ultimately then later on I discover by sharing and researching and looking up, Googling and stuff, oh, a lot of these things said are from the Bible. What? Of which I did inherit my father-in-law's Bible when he died, one of his Bibles, and I have been reading it almost every day and doing the same thing my father-in-law did, initialing my name with the date next to each passage that I read. Heaven has had me create so many lists in my life. And I was always a list person because I'm an organized person. And yet the lists that I've been creating since meeting Jesus have all been like, let's document cliches, metaphors, fairy tales. Let's document Bible readings. Let's document heaven's words. Heaven's words? Let's do this and that. That's really all the notes I have. I mean, I don't know. Why do you think you had this experience? Why? Because heaven does choose such life, such souls in life to be, yes, the chosen ones to share. And ultimately, at this point in my life, definitely feeling I've lost my entire family, and I definitely lost the life I had. When my father-in-law died, it literally I went one way and my family went another way, and yet ultimately the way I went was I was not trying to leave anybody. I was trying to be embraced by everybody, but they couldn't handle it. Prior to meeting Jesus, with my father-in-law as he was dying, a shared death experience, I had been on lithium for 14 or 17 years because I was diagnosed with bipolar. I've been off of lithium for 4.5 years. I came off of lithium right before I met Jesus. Go figure, right? Heaven at that point was like, we're going to have you go down, Natalie, with COVID round number 2. You're going to sleep like Sleeping Beauty. You're going to find it all so peaceful. Don't worry, Natalie. Remember also, Natalie, this isn't all about you. This is about life. And whenever it's about one, it's always about many more. My husband and daughter's trip was delayed to come on a planned visit to visit his mother and father at that point because I went into bed with COVID, and that was, nobody could go anywhere when somebody had COVID, whoa, and the last thing they wanted was to give COVID to, my husband's parents. So that was January 4th. And it was a month later that my father-in-law died. My husband, after my COVID and my daughters, came up and visited, and at that point, they came up on January the 26th, I believe, 2022. At that point, everybody did know that JC was, in fact, dying. And at that point, I was getting everything together in our home in Florida, somebody had to come in and care for all of our animals there. We didn't have a farm yet, but we had a lot of animals and fish tanks and everything. And ultimately, when I returned from everything, well, all the fish were dead, our rats were dead, and pet rats. And My husband and I got in a fight, put our house on the market, had nowhere to go, didn't know what we wanted to do. He didn't know what he wanted to do. His work at the point, he was on a contract, and the contract still had a year. And so we were looking for a rental. There was no way to leave this sanctuary, beautiful home we'd lived in for 10 years and go find a rental. Like, no way. And then my husband and I found a rent-a-farm that was listed that wasn't supposed to be listed as a rental. Because, like, nobody rents farms, right? But there we were. And these are the ways I believe heaven was leading and blueprinting all of our lives. Again, not just about Natalie. Heaven had this rent-a-farm available for us because heaven already knew what we couldn't know and didn't know back then, that we were going to be moving here into my husband's childhood home so that his mother could remain in the home and not have to go into any sort of facility down the road, so to speak. The hardest part of all of this for me has been dealing with the hate upon me. It doesn't make sense, because even in my lithium days and bipolar days, which ultimately I was told by many doctors, I never had bipolar. My one doctor who was prescribing me the lithium for that 10 years, I thought he was breaking up with me when he said, I can't see you anymore. You've stopped taking lithium. He goes, I don't think you ever had bipolar. I think you have family issues. I think you need therapy. So ultimately, I've had many medical personnel in the past many, many years say, you don't need psychiatric care, Natalie. You need therapy, individual therapy, and family therapy. And yet that doesn't make my family happy, because they're still fixated on this Natalie is mentally ill, because that's what they had created of me. And and then doctors had given me the diagnosis, and so there's no I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not angry with my family. I'm not angry with my doctors. I'm not angry with myself. I understand it all. And this is what's the hardest to explain. The how and the why. Heaven. Heaven is real. And I do feel I'm here with great purpose to continue becoming the unedited, unscripted, very real, not raw, beautiful, loving soul and life. And it is a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice that I question. I serve heaven every day of my life. And the truth is, I always had. And yet, up until I met Jesus, I was unaware of my own third entity. We have mind, body, and soul. 3 entities, just like heaven has 3 entities: God, Jesus, and Spirit. 3. I didn't know my soul. I didn't understand the connection, that it needed to be all 3. And it's been the past 4.5 years I've realized and understood that anytime an angel is even coming through to me, it's not just a message from an angel. It's God, Jesus, and Spirit. To me, Spirit and angels are the same. I hope this makes sense. It makes sense to me. And yet, I don't know. I don't know where heaven's going to lead this good shepherd. And yet I do know that I am a good shepherd, and I do lead my flock. And I'm blessed and grateful to have this life. And, I'm really big into the metaphors and cliches. This too shall pass. My therapist continues to tell me she can't believe the level of hope and faith and positivity that I have. And ultimately, it all goes back to, since the day I met Jesus, I trust heaven more than I trust any life, including my own. So I do have hopes and prayers. I do pray every day. I talk out loud every day to my animals, to heaven, to God, Jesus, and angels. And ultimately, I believe, like with my father-in-law, with his dying moment, this was very important to him to have somebody carry on Jesus. And so it might be when my time comes to die, it might not be until then. that my family, that will be my final wish. It is my wish every day, that my family could learn to embrace Natalie in different ways, because I don't like being angry, and yet when you're living under such sham and drudgery, vexations of such life spirit being hateful upon you, it does create anger, because I'm human. I don't make any claims to being some special divine creature of life here on earth. I'm not a prophet. I'm not here to preach to anybody. I'm here to share that Jesus is real. And I'm still trying to figure out, like, how I can even share. Like, how do you know Jesus is real? These questions are so vital to my further understanding what my purpose here in life is. I'm truly grateful. I think the next forum is this upcoming Wednesday. I've really found amazing peace in listening to others share their stories, because they're going through the same thing that I am. It's so much. I'm talking about our lives being blueprinted, and ultimately what happens to persons such as myself that are with a near-death experience, which I've had many of those myself. Shared death experience, we are taken to another dimension. It is out of body. Who knows what it is, but it's definitely a different dimension. And when you hear in life people talk about being implanted or downloaded or embedded with, instantaneous, a whole life right there. How do you even begin to share that? I am so grateful that recently I did just find those steno notebooks from my journey on January the 28th, all handwritten, front and back, 4 of them. I haven't yet gone back and read those words, and yet I look forward to doing that at some point. Question number 7 has been answered. Why do you think you had this experience? Only heaven knows why, how, I'm not just anything, and yet I am here now to continue sharing and learning. The next question, number 8, is going to be, what was the impact of this shared crossing? Well, I think I just answered that. The impact is I got thrown away. Woo!